In our last series of how to prepare for your interview, we ended that last video on the interview questions. So here today, I have Mr. Gideon back. He's back. He has given us his time this time around. So he's back here to come and tell us some interview questions. So he's going to take us through some interview questions and how you can answer them. So I'll let him introduce himself again because of those watching this video for the first time. My name is Omowumi, and I'm a licensed teacher in the UK. On this channel, we talk about teaching abroad, life abroad. If this is your first time here, please subscribe, like, and share this video for someone that needs this information. And I will allow my guest to introduce himself.
All right. I want to say good day to everyone watching us live now. And my name is Edmond Gideon. I'm a licensed and a teacher, a career coach, a science teacher in the UK. And I'm just like I do say, I'm just a normal Edmond Gideon. Thank you very much.
You're welcome back to my channel. So we take them through the interview questions because definitely if you're being called for your interview, probably you've applied online or you apply directly to the school through their website or through an agency, you will go through the interview stage definitely. Okay, so you've been asked or sent an email to come for an interview. You're going to go through the teaching interview, which is the micro teaching, and you're going to go through the one-to-one section. So we are starting this video today with the one-to-one section, whereby you'll be asked questions. You have to meet with the HR, with the head of the department you're going to be employed to. So Mr. Gideon is going to take us through some questions you likely to be asked.
Okay. Let me start by saying I might not give you the exact question you'll be asked on that day of your interview because school differs and we have different people with different questions, different schools with different questions, and sometimes different applicants with different questions. So I might not say these are the exact questions you are likely to be asked.
Questions you will be asked
during your interview, but these are the likely questions because just like I said in the previous episodes we've had that I've been to series of interviews and myself I've been in a board of in an interview myself conducting with some other people to assess some applicants before getting that particular job. And I've got at least about 15 questions which are likely questions. They are general and they are common questions to be asked during interview, probably in the UK. It also works in some other countries, but we're narrowing our niche to the UK and some other European countries. Now, the first question I would like to start with is what inspired you to become a teacher? That's one of the most common questions you've been asked in most UK schools interview, irrespective of the subject you'll be teaching. They want to know why and what motivated you to becoming a teacher. So I believe one of the best way to answer such question, I'm not going to be giving you exact thing to say because I wouldn't want to, just limit our understanding and knowledge of the knowledge about answering different questions by what I'm going to be saying here. So I want every individual to, make research, try and study these questions we're going to be discussing today so you can have the appropriate, the perfect, and the best answers to such questions when you're asked during your interview. So when you're asked what inspired you to become a teacher, that means you're being expected to talk a little about your background, starting from what you study in relating to what you wanted to do. For example, someone like myself, I studied education for my degree, and I studied for example, I studied biology education for my university degree, and for my master's, I did microbiology. For my first master's, microbiology. For second master's, I did environmental biology. So just to know where you're coming from, what motivated you, what inspired you to teach, probably some of the questions, some of the problems you've discovered in that area of specification you've studied, and your discipline, putting it into, relating it to teaching students how to come up with things as regards that particular specialism of what you did when you're in school and things like that. For example, you can also talk about, I remember there was one interview I attended, and I told them my parents are teachers and I know how it feels like to impact the next generation. I can see the joy in them. They are not directly secondary school teachers. They were pastors, they were, clergies, but they are also teaching. And I can see how that motivates them, how that impacts the upcoming generation through their choice of profession, through their choice of career. So, talking about my background, my educational background, the experiences I've had from my parents, why I developed the interest to teach myself, and combining all of these things together, what I think, I'm not saying is the best response, I think can give you necessary ingredients to answer that question correctly. And without wasting much time, the second time is, why do you want to work in that particular school?
That's cool. Yes, it's a common question.
Yeah, so it's a common question. So you've been shortlisted for an interview. They want to know, why do you choose our school? Why do you apply? Is it that you're just going through the website and you're just applying randomly just because we saw your application? That's why, or probably because they've shortlisted you, that's why you're coming, not because you had the school interest or you've read anything about the school. And this particular question relates back to what we discussed in the last episode we had, that before you apply to any school, make sure you read about the school, read about their objectives, read about the teaching policy, read about the safeguarding policy, read about everything about the school. So when you read about the school, it gives you a soft ground for answering that question without having to rack your brain, without having to think so deep. Part of what you've read on their website will be one of the things, part of the points you'll be, throwing back at them to tell them the reason why you want to actually work in the school. That's why I do say, before you go for that interview, the night before the interview, make sure you're sitting with the website, the particular school's website, studying about the school, such that when you get to the school, at least the faces that will be present during that interview, you've seen them in the school website, you've read about them, you know each individual's position in the school, and then you could be able to say some things, like one or two things about the school and why you want to work in the school. For example, the school I'm currently working, the school I will be resuming with by September, one of the things I read about the school was that they'll be having a new building, a very nice building, like for next year, in which I saw the plan on the website. I saw, the architectural design, and it's got me attracted too. So part of what I mentioned that day was their building plan. So it gave them an insight. Really studied about the school, I've learned about the school, and I've made my research. So which gives me an avenue to tell them why I would like to work with the school. And then I've seen some of, just being within the school area during the same day I'm having my interview, I could see some problems, because why the question rallies around about what problems do you want to solve for us? What have you seen that we are not doing right that you want to correct for us? Do you get what I'm trying to say? So you can talk about your specialism. For example, let's say you're applying in anything related to science. You can mention making sure that the students become a science literate, bringing down different technologies, different teaching philosophy, to make sure students are being able to understand science, beyond the four walls of the classroom, and being able to interpret abstract things in science. And then you can also mention, your ability to break down information into chunks for them to be able to understand science, to pass their GCSE exams for those in Key Stage 4. I hope you get what I'm trying to say. So all these things are good ingredients to answering these kinds of questions. Just like I said, this is not the exact thing I'm saying we should say during the interview. It's just an insight. It's just an insight to what we
Yes.
could, look forward to. And then the third question I've written is, what is your teaching philosophy? I think the first episode we ever had on your channel, we talked about pedagogy, philosophy. You should know
Philosophy.
what a teaching philosophy is, and you should be able to mention what teaching philosophy you think suits your teaching style, and the one you've
Yes.
mastered so much, by which you think whatever class you're teaching, whatever learners you've got in your classroom, regardless of their teaching learning abilities and their disabilities, could you could work well, and then make sure you pass all your information and your messages to the students without any issues. So, number 4, how would you manage a difficult classroom? How would you manage a difficult classroom? So, this is just to see how well you've developed your teaching pedagogy. Your teaching pedagogy comes into place now, and then your behavior management. Your behavior management.
Yes.
How can you work with the school behavior management? Some schools, they have first warning, second warning, third warning. Some schools have C1, C2, C3, internal inclusion, and so on and so forth. So, how do you manage behavior in your classroom? How can you manage difficult behavior? Because you're going to be teaching students with different learning disabilities. And then you have some students with different learning abilities. How can you cope with these students coming together in one classroom, and then making sure you have a very good lesson with every one of them, making sure all of them understand what you're teaching in that particular classroom? So that's what that question is talking about. And the fifth one is, how do you differentiate instruction for diverse learners? So these are common questions. It's one of the major questions that you'll be asked any interview. So how do you make sure every learners, regardless of their learning abilities, are able to understand what you're teaching? Some people are slow learners, some people are fast learners. Some people learn at fast pace, while some, it takes time before they understand. Some, you need to repeat what you've said. Some, you need to, assess them formatively. Some, you need to do, your teaching philosophy and your teaching pedagogy comes into place now, in teaching students with different abilities in your classroom. So this particular question is to know how you can touch each student in that class, regardless of their learning abilities. So I wouldn't want to dwell much on that, because we wouldn't want to waste much time. So it's our job to, look for how you could answer that questions properly and perfectly during your interview. And then number, I think the sixth one, they would ask you, what are your strengths and your weaknesses as a teacher? And then here, you would need to be very careful, most especially about your weakness. About your weakness.
Yes.
Yeah. Because if you are not careful about what you would say while you're mentioning your weakness, you might say something that might make you get disqualified for that job. Yeah. And then most times when I'm being asked, I'm just going to give myself as an example. When I'm being asked about my weakness, my area of strength and weakness, I always, I love talking about, if you can give me a second, I want to look for, okay, I have one thing I love to say during interview when I'm being asked about my area of weakness. And I love to say it this way. I believe that acknowledging and working on our weaknesses is an essential part of professional growth. And one area I believe I'm continually improving is my tendency to be overly self-critical. And as a perfectionist, I sometimes set high standards for myself and for my students, which can lead to undue stress and pressure. And to address this weakness, I've been working on developing a more balanced approach and focusing on progress rather than perfection. And I remind myself that mistakes are an essential part of learning process, and that it's okay to ask for help and for advice from my colleagues, senior colleagues. So, and another area I'm actively working on is incorporating more technology into my lessons. While I'm comfortable using digital tools, I recognize the importance of staying up to date with the latest educational technology and software. And to also address this, I've been attending professional development workshops and seeking guidance from colleagues and people who are more experienced in my area of, profession, like my specialism. So this response is just to let them know I've got a very good weakness. So it's a weakness, but it's a very good one. It's a good one from the sense that I'm looking forward to improving it, and it's something which is good because I'm being overly critical just because I want to be a perfectionist. I don't want to make mistakes.
Yeah.
You get what I'm trying to say? And then one of the mistakes people make during the interview is when they ask them for their area of weakness, they love talking about being emotional. Some people talk about I'm being over emotional, I get too much, I get easily attached. Yeah, I've been in interviews and I've heard people say such things, which is not good enough. We are not here to criticize, but we are here to advise. I think such response is not good enough. Moving on, the seventh one, which I've just written, is how do you assess students' progress and achievement during lessons? How do you assess students' progress and achievement during lessons? And one of the things I think we must put in mind is they want to know how you do your formative and summative assessment.
Yes.
So, for your formative assessment, I can give you tips of what we can say, and we can mention mini whiteboards, all class voting, cold calling, and the likes. I wouldn't want to say everything, but at least I've just given 3 clips now. So you can use mini whiteboard. So while you're teaching, before you get to the next point, you ask your students to show you or to write on their mini whiteboard, assess them formatively before you get to the next point. So that can be used to access the whole class. For students who wouldn't want to write on the mini whiteboard, you can use cold calling. You can cold call them randomly to tell you the answers. And if you think cold calling might not work because some students wouldn't want to react to strangers, like I mean strangers in the sense that a teacher who they haven't seen before. Let's say you are a new teacher in that school, you can do class voting. You can just tell them to raise their hand for an objective question. For example, you have 3 options in your objective questions you want to ask them, and you can tell them, I want the whole class to vote on 1. If your answer is A, raise 1 hand. If your answer is B, raise 2 hands. If your answer is C, put your 2 hands on your head. So that's just a whole class voting. So if they are choosing answer A, you can see if they are getting it right or wrong from the whole class voting. So those are just 3 clips. Mini whiteboards, whole class voting, cold calling, and then others. We have many others for formative assessment. Many others, which is still included in your teaching philosophy and your teaching pedagogy. So I'm just giving clue. I'm not saying that is what we should say outrightly during our interviews, but that's just those are just clues of what we could respond with. And number 8 I've written down here is, how would you undo a parent-teacher conference? How would you undo a parent-teacher conference? For example, in the UK, there's something we call parent evening. In Nigeria, I think parent evening is what we call open day, where parents come, assess
or PTA. Some schools call it PTA.
So how would you, because they will let you know, some parents, when they come, for example, if you're a teacher and then you continue to give their child C3 room remover every time they want to speak to you, they want to have a meeting with you, how do you handle such meetings? How do you handle such conference? Parent evening, how do you undo it? So these are questions we can look forward to during our interview. The number 9 question I've written down is, what extracurricular activities would you do if successful in your interview? I think this is a common question they ask you during it. Yeah. For example, I'm a guy, and then most extracurricular activities guys do is football, sport, PE. So whatever interview I attend, any interview I attend, I do tell them my extracurricular activities is joining the PE. When I'm during my free period, I'm always excited to join the PE. I'm good in playing football. I'm good at playing football. I'm good at playing basketball, table tennis, long tennis, and I think I go to gym every day. So joining the PE, doing sport activities would not be something stressful and something I'm gonna be struggling with. So it's something I enjoy doing. So I would always love to join the PE. For ladies, you can mention music. Yeah. Some ladies has got good voice. You can mention drama. You can mention dance.
Yeah, drama. Yeah, dancing. Yeah.
If you don't do all of those, you can say, I enjoy reading. So you can join them at the library.
Yeah.
So they just want to know that you've got something beyond your specialism. Yeah. So they just want to know, okay, what if our music teacher is not around, is not available, and then we need to cover.
Exactly.
Is there any other thing you can do apart from your specialism?
Yes.
So
yes.
And then the 10th one I've written is, how do you stay current with development in your subject area? How do you stay current with your development in your subject area? So in your area of specialism, how do you stay current with development in there? So you have to talk about what you do to develop yourself in your area of specialism. Do you attend online workshops, online tutoring? Do you do stuff, a lot of things, CPD training, online training, certifications, memberships, all those things. They want to know what you're doing to, keep developing yourself such that you're not just stagnant in the same position in your area of expertise. So moving on to the next one, how would you support students with special educational needs? This, you can't do without this question in any interview.
You can't escape it.
You can't escape it. How do you support students with special educational needs? I remember the last episode we had, I talked about class on a page. And then on every class on the page, you have every student with learning disabilities in that document, in that class on a page. You get to know what learning disability they've got and how you could support them. Although the document is continuously updated per time, because you could be supporting a student in a way this term and then next term it changes. So they want to know how you could support students with different special needs, educational needs. I wouldn't want to talk much about that, because for every new teacher, this is what you should have made your research about. Teaching students with special education needs is what you should have studied about. We have many educational needs. So go on Google, type it out, special education needs and how I can support them as a teacher. It's all on Google.
Yes.
It will bring them. You could see some videos to watch and everything. Just like I told you, we are not telling you the exact thing to say at that interview. We're just giving you a clue of what you could be asked at the interview. And then moving on. What is your approach to behavior management? What is your approach to behavior management? This question, I'm just going to give a clue again. My answer is always direct and simple. Direct and simple for this question. Warm and strict. Warm and strict. Yeah. So for every school, when I say warm and strict, they know what I mean immediately. So when I say warm and strict, to me, it's one of the best behavior management approach I've been using. When you warm, you create a relationship with the students, they get to know you, they trust you, because when you create relationship with them, they trust you. And when they trust you, they relate with you better. They want to listen to you. They want to hear everything you want to say. So when you create that friendship, that relationship with them, there's a level of trust you've built. And then engaging them in that lesson, you won't struggle with it. It's not going to be a problem to engage them in lesson. And then after that warm relationship, warm entrance, and the warm reception, then you must be strict with the behavioral standard. So that's just a clue to answering that question. I'm not saying you should say warm and strict every school you get to. I'm just giving a clue.
Yeah.
So the 13th one. How do you foster a positive learning environment? How do you foster a positive learning environment? So I'm not going to say a lot about that. If you are a teacher, a trained teacher, you should know how to answer that question, because it's part of the teacher trainings we've done. It's part of the there's this thing we call 1 year of training. It's called ETC in the UK, but in Nigeria, I forgot what it's called. Yeah. So during your years of training, early career training,
teaching,
early teaching career, you should have been taught different approach and different things to foster a positive learning environment in your classroom. And then number 14, can you share an example of a successful lesson or project you've led? These are one of the questions you can't escape. Yeah. Give us an example of a successful lesson or project you've led. It's simple. Don't lie. Don't make up things. Don't make up scenarios in your head. Just talk about a simple lesson you taught, how you taught the lesson, what you did during the lesson, how you were able to engage the students during the lesson, and how you assess the students to make sure they understood everything you taught them during the lesson. Simple. Okay, let me give a clue again on this particular question. If I'm being asked, how can you share an example of a lesson or a successful lesson or project you led? Okay. In my teaching experience, I remember there was a particular class, a key stage 3 class, I taught plant and animal cell. And I made use of a banking hall to explain how plant cell and animal cell, the organelles, the functions, the components of the cells, using live realities to explain abstract things in science, and using good formative assessments and different instructional materials, students were able to understand completely and perfectly the functions, the components of plant animal cell. So then I will now tell them how I started teaching them, what I did, what I was doing during the lesson, to make sure the lesson was successful and to make sure all students understood what I was saying. So if they ask you about a successful lesson, they will ask you, what is your worst lesson you've ever taught?
Some will ask you, but because if you go for an interview, you will do a micro teaching first. In most schools, you do a micro teaching first before the one-to-one. Some will ask you, how was your lesson? And what
would you do differently?
Have done better.
Yeah.
Yes.
What would you do differently if you are to teach that lesson again? What would you do differently?
That lesson again, yeah.
When you are being asked that question, don't look. Some people look surprised, like, what do you expect me to do differently again? Yeah, like, I had a perfect lesson. Everyone understood what I was teaching. That means you're not open to learning. So most times when you were being asked, wow, you had a very good lesson, but if you are given the opportunity to teach that same lesson again, what would you do differently? You can tell them, okay, I would work on my time frame for my formative assessment. For example, while I was asking the students to, give me answer on this particular question, I would give them more time to think, because I've got students with different learning abilities in the classroom. Get what I'm trying to say? I would do more formative assessments to make sure all students understood what I was teaching before I continue to the next point. So make sure, even if you think you've done everything, talk about some things you would have done better. So that's it. And then the 15th question, number 15, although I have some other ones which I would want us to talk about. Why would you want to teach in this specific age range and subject area? So why do you want to teach secondary? Why do you want to teach Key Stage 3, Key Stage 4? And why do you want to teach science? Why do you want to teach math? Why do you want to teach English? Things like that. We should be able to answer that, because that's the area of specialism. So no one can give you clue about that. And then there are some questions which you must be able to understand before you answer them. For example, they can ask you, what do you understand by the word curriculum? Yeah. So these are things you should understand. They can ask you, what is UK curriculum? What is a science curriculum? What is a UK science curriculum? You get what I'm trying to say? So these are what you should understand before getting to an interview. And then they could ask you, how would you handle a disruptive student? An intentional disruptive student. How would you handle such student? I wouldn't want to talk much on all those questions. What would you do if a student confided in you about a personal issue?
You can't escape it.
It's a common question.
Yes.
So some people, some of us, I've met a person who that same question was asked, and then the person said, oh, I will make sure I kept that issue a secret. No confidentiality. Every issue discussed with you by any student or a staff must be put across to the designated safeguarding lead of the school.
Yes.
And then they will ask you, what if the designated safeguarding lead is not in school at that time?
Yes, they will.
And then you will let them understand, we do not have one designated safeguarding lead in the school. We have designated safeguarding lead, and we have DDSL. That means Deputy Designated Safeguarding Lead. And that is where you have all the SLTs, the personal assistant to the principal, the HR, the operation manager, and then the head of school or the principal. So it is not possible all of these people are not in school.
Exactly.
So that answers the question perfectly. And then the last one I would just want us to talk about before we move on to the next thing we've got is how would you adapt your teaching for a student with a specific learning disability or learning difficulty? How would you adapt your teaching for a student with a specific learning difficulty? We have some students with some learning difficulties that it's so bad that they can't sit down. They can't sit down. How would you make sure they are not, excluded? They are not ostracized in your lesson. It's so bad that some students cannot stop talking during lesson. They can't stop talking for 30 seconds. And then some students, they can't stop throwing things during lesson. You get? And then some students, they can't stop, a lot of things. So how would you adapt your teaching for such students with specific learning difficulty? And that is where things we've been saying from the previous episode. So if you have not subscribed to this channel, you need to do so. You can watch all the previous videos we've done from the first part, and some live sessions she has had with some of the other contemporary juggernauts on this particular channel had spoken about, so you could understand everything that had been spoken about this particular issue. And that is where also
Yes.
the discussion of behavior management also comes in.
Yes.
So I'm sorry, I haven't written more than all these questions I've mentioned right here. So these are just the questions I've written, about 18, major 15, and then some other 3 or some other 4, just to make it like 20 questions. 20 questions.
Yeah.
That are common questions to be asked during an interview for teaching in the UK. Yeah. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you so much. I would tell you that if you can research on these questions and many more, you would definitely, with the one-to-one, you're definitely going to skip through the one-to-one aspect. Also, I'll just add this one question before we leave. It's not a question, but I will tell you to research on prevent duty. Some schools ask about prevent duty training. So you need to know that, research about it, know the aims and goals of prevent. You can even do a CPD, it's free on gov.uk. You can do a CPD on prevent training. In some schools, you also don't escape this question. So
Yeah,
thank you so
definitely.
much, Mr. Gideon, for coming.
Well,
Thank you so much for coming today. So I will see you guys in the next series. Yes, I will see you in the next one, because we still have another video after this one, still on the interview series. So I will see you in the next video. Please like, share, and subscribe to this channel. Thank you so much. I will see you in the next one. Bye.